So if we can touch a bit more on your Christian journey. So you went to the University of Auckland, where you were part of the leadership of Pacific Students for Christ.
Yeah.
How did being a leader in that group prepare you for your career?
I think it stems back from Mum and Dad. So because Mum and Dad were the first of their generation, and then I am the firstborn of both on my dad's side, and then on my mum's side, I was the oldest here in New Zealand. So I was always had a sense of being a leader just from being at home. And then through church came to faith, and so that played a really, really important role. So by the time I got to university, it was natural that I would be part of the Pacific Students for Christ, and meet up with the likes of Efeso Collins and Herman Paul Ritzlav and Wilmerson. There's a whole generation of us.
Yeah.
And so then, in that journey of PCFC, the difference of leading an organisation that I have now and leading that type of group is all volunteer. I can't force people to do anything.
Yeah.
And so there was a natural, kind of like the things that I learned through that experience was clear. What is our vision for PSFC? We wanted young Pacific people to feel welcome and comfortable in having a faith in the university, and that there was a place of worship which was very Pacific. So, we chilled, we laughed, we cried, all of that stuff, the best of who we are as a people. So then we as a leadership team, we made sure we kept the values that we had instilled in our own homes and brought them to the university. So interesting leadership team, because we do things how we do, like real family-oriented, consensus type leadership approach. Everyone has a view, everyone has a voice. And so then, it brought the best out of us. And I think, through that time, we had amazing services, 150 strong, 200 strong. There were times where McLaurin Chapel would have to open up the partition because it was a thriving little group of young Pacific Christians that were just wanting to, change the world back in those days,
Yeah.
Back in the 90s. So I graduated in 98, so it's a long time ago.
It's so interesting because you mentioned some of the other people in your cohort, and there was a whole group of you that were involved in the leadership of Pacific Students for Christ who have now gone on to do really big things. And I think that's so important because sometimes when we do voluntary work or we are involved in organisations, church, for example, people don't think to write that down on their CV.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it was just, we were such a minority too, the Pacific student doing well at university was an anomaly, it wasn't the norm. And so there was a number of factors that meant that, we all came together and then we had this common faith that meant that, we were all together going through this journey because we'd come together, this group of us, and then we'll go back into the various classes and that, and we're the minority in those classes. I studied law, so there was a small group of us Pacific that were in law, and so then to come into a place where one, faith is normal, and then two, we're Pacific, we're just ourselves. So it was a kind of like also a coping mechanism or strength of a network, and then coupled with that, our parents came for us to do well at school so that we can get greater opportunities and so that we can serve even more. And so that drive too, there was that commonality amongst us. And so, I'm really proud when I look at the group of us that have done well, yourself included as Sarah and the like. There's a whole cohort of us that are doing really well. If back in the 90s we were to say, hey, Mac Uzo, you're going to be Chief Executive for the Ministry for Pacific Peoples, I would say, that ain't ever going to happen. But somehow, thankfully, by God's grace, we've been able to achieve, a lot of us, a lot of good things for our community.
Yeah, so from what you've just shared, it sounds like you had the support, the sense of belonging, you know, you had that real drive from your, you know, family, you know, that connection to the migrant dream. And also something you touched on earlier was that you have the chance to develop your leadership skills when you don't have management levers, right? Because I think people think that once you become a chief executive or once you get into a management role, that's when you're a leader, when actually it takes much more, I think you have to draw on all of your powers of persuasion and influence when you don't have a role like that.
That's right. I mean, I think of the different proverbs that our parents would teach us. You know, the common one, ole ala le pule le tautua, the pathway to leadership is through service. So if I serve others and I serve you with everything that I have, not that I'm manipulating you, but there's a sense of reciprocity. If I give everything for you and I give the best for you, and then there's the sense that I want to do that back for you too. And so the way that we run our leadership team was very much like that. I'm going to sacrifice to you for the greater good. This is what we want to do. Come on, let's do this together. And that kind of sense of buy-in, you know, and I see that with, you know, how my dad used to run things, you know, back with his family. But most of the time it was the sense of consensus. Let's all move together. You know, we all move in the same direction in unity. So powerful. And so those are the things that, you know, that doesn't then stop just because I'm leading an agency. It's the same principles of leadership, you know, without the formal authority, to then having the formal authority, but still utilising those same principles. You know, if you have to lead by position, that's the weakest form of leadership. And so, you know, that's John Maxwell, that's not Mac Leauanae. And so then, you know, that influence and through service and then leading because of that service is powerful.